Alaska Republican Senator Dan Sullivan denounced Biden's actions. COVID mask mandates are coming back this fall in some states, despite evidence showing they were not effective during the pandemic. Bridget Ziegler, director of the Leadership Institute's School Board Programs, appeared on the Jenna Ellis in the Morning program to talk about the issue.
When I see this attempt to instill that fear, especially after we see the detrimental impact it's had on our children's academic success and mental health, it is mind-boggling.
She said there's no logical reason beyond the need for control for masks to be mandated.
And my background's in risk management and risk consulting, so I do risk assessments for a living, and you didn't have to be an epidemiologist to see that putting a mask on a child really would undermine any potential mitigation that those masks allegedly had. They'd be picking them up, touching them, putting them on dirty. I mean, it was just the lack of common sense.
She offered advice to parents in districts where mandates are being discussed or even implemented.
So there's two things. I always say the way you advocate is equally as important as what you're advocating for. So be thoughtful, but strategic.
Sorority girls at the University of Wyoming are suing their national headquarters for allowing a male into the Greek house. Here's AFN's Steve Jordahl with the story.
Artemis Langford is a 21-year-old man who applied for membership in the Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority because he's pretending to be a woman. The national headquarters ignored the normal process of accepting a recruit, and to the horror of the women in the house, Langford has access to all the women's private spaces. In a conversation with MSNBC, Langford claimed he was the victim.
I want people to know that it's never okay for that kind of scrutiny on a person just because of their identity.
But the sorority girl's attorney, Cassie Craven, says Langford has not had any gender mutilation surgery and is still, at times, obviously attracted to girls. And that puts them in danger.
Are we not entitled to any safe spaces? Because Title IX specifically exempts men from joining women's sororities.
The woke left wants to pitch this as a civil rights issue, but Craven says it's not.
This isn't a political debate. This is a biological reality. And unfortunately, these young women have been forced to experience the lie.
And despite the constant cries of denying existence and some supposed transgenocide, it's not the trans people who are disappearing.
This isn't about transgender inclusion. This is about erasing women.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
That's a wrap on news at this hour. We do appreciate your listening. Go over to afn.net to see more. For American Family News, I'm Robert Ford.
What is the most important truth that you'll ever hear? Here's Pastor Jeff Shreve.
What is the message of the cross of Jesus Christ? The cross of Jesus Christ just screams out, I love you.
Discover the power that is available to you through the cross of Christ. Join Pastor Jeff Shreve on From His Heart each weeknight at 6 Central here on American Family Radio.
Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be His ambassadors. Even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio. My name is Abraham Hamilton III. Thank you for tuning into the program. We have J Mac on tap. Not on tap, but in studio. And we're ready to rock and roll with today's edition of the program. At this very moment, many of you, if not most of you, are making your transition from your part-time jobs where you generate an income to your full-time jobs where you cultivate an outcome. Having just returned from this weekend, first and foremost, I hope that you had a wonderful time joining the Lord's body for worship. I pray that it was impactful and instructive, and that in this increasingly evidential, with increasing evidence, the time period reveals it seems like we're closer. I'll say it this way. We are closer now than we were yesterday to the Lord's return. I'll say it that way. I think that's the best way to go about saying it. With all of the events that are swirling around us, they affirm the reality that the Bible is true. That the Bible is true at all points. And so, as you transition now to your full-time jobs, I want to encourage you to do so with intentionality and with understanding concerning the context that God has given you the privilege to serve Him in and through. That context, being members of families, however your family looks. You know, the Lord knows all of the writing. That could be taken the wrong way. Make no mistake about it. God ordained the marital institution as the fulcrum of the family. God's design for marriage and His definition of it exclusively includes one man and one woman in lifelong committed relationship with the capacity to bear offspring. All right? So when I say however your family looks, I'm not making any room for the, honestly, the perversions of God's institution, of His design for the family. But understanding that we live in a fallen world, that there are evidences of brokenness all around us. You know, there's an overwhelming proliferation of single-parent families, an overwhelming proliferation of all manner of things that transpire. But none of those things are sufficient to cause us to adjust our submission to God's holy and righteous standard. And so within your familial context, we have some who listen to us who are widows. You know, we have some who are widowers. Various contexts. Some of you are what's commonly described as empty nesters. Some of you are like me with young children in the home. Whatever, that's what I'm talking about when I say whatever your family looks like. But God has given you the blessing of that particular context to glorify Him and to discharge your faithfulness to Him in obedience. And so as you are listening to me and transitioning to your full-time jobs where you're cultivating an outcome, it's important that you do so with the understanding that God has provided for us in His Word concerning family. The first human institution that He established was the family, with marriage at the center. The first command that God gave to mankind was within the familial context. Before you get to a monarch, the order of monarchs, before you get to the modern iterations of civil government, before you get to the orders of priests, the Lord establishes the family first. There's a reason for that. The unfortunate reality is that the world has been far more intentional, by and large, not everyone. There are exceptions to this, but by and large, the world has been far more intentional about establishing, a systematized theology, creating a worldview formation. I've shared with you all before how Justice Stephen Breyer in the Carson versus Macon, a Supreme Court decision, where the Christian schools in Maine, Bangor Christian School and Temple Academy, was excluded from the state's, basically its voucher program, because they happened to be a religious Christian schools who taught consistent with their faith. Isn't that amazing? And Justice Stephen Breyer said the quiet part out loud. He said, man, the reason why we believe in providing funding for public schools and excluding Christian schools that are faithful to teaching Christian doctrine, I'm paraphrasing and summarizing what he said, but in his dissent in that case, he literally said, because the public schools we fund are the principal mechanism for creating the value system that ensures our democracy. The principal mechanism for transmitting was the exact word he used, transmitting the value system to ensure our democracy. So you thought they were reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's what they were teaching, when you didn't realize it was a values transmission system. Yeah. And so they want a values transmission system that excludes the knowledge of God. That excludes God. But the Lord established a family. He never gave authority over the children to the government schools. He never gave authority over the children to, the children's ministry or to the youth ministry. The family is God's mechanism, primary mechanism for accomplishing multi-generational witness, for evangelizing and catechizing and making disciples. And as I've said, and I will continue to say, the scriptures reveal none of us can guarantee what will happen with our offspring, but what God requires of us is faithfulness. Will we obey what he requires of us concerning his heritage that he entrusts in our care for season? Will we be faithful to obey him? This is what concerns us. Now, here we are today on the September 11th, 2023. This day, 22 years ago, life in America changed forever. And just praying about and thinking about those events really has moved me for today's program. So I'm going to spend some time talking about that because I believe it's appropriate to reflect on what has happened in our nation and to examine what has happened in our nation in light of Scripture. And as we examine what has happened in our nation, we examine what's happened in our hearts. So we're going to